Welcome everyone to today's Synergist webinar, Planning and Deploying a Large-Scale Ergonomics Process Year by Year. I'm Kay Bechtold, Managing Editor of the Synergist, the magazine of AIHA. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and especially Velocity AHS for sponsoring today's webinar. Our speaker today is Christy Watts, Director of Ergonomics Consulting and Senior Ergonomics Engineer at Velocity AHS. She leads large-scale ergonomics initiatives in the manufacturing and pharmaceutical industries and helps organizations build internal ergonomics expertise using software solutions. Christy received a Master of Science degree in ergonomics and biomechanics from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and has achieved recognition as a certified professional ergonomist. Christy has offered to answer questions both during and after her presentation. As you think of questions during the presentation, please go ahead and type them into the chat window on the right side of your screen and send them to all panelists. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Christy.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, Kay, and welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be here today to talk about what it looks like to deploy a large-scale ergonomics process. We call it year by year, but really I'm hoping that what you can take from this by the end of the presentation is to just grab some snippets here and there and try and apply them to what you're doing currently. This isn't a playbook for exactly what you need to do, but you can take some elements from each of these years and maybe apply them to where you are currently. We're going to talk a little bit about what this looks like for companies who are just starting to deploy their ergonomics process right now and others who have been doing it for quite a while. It is important that we grow with our organization, what our goals are and what we're trying to achieve. And so oftentimes our metrics are going to change on a yearly basis. So it is nice to be able to pivot and just make adjustments based on where we are as an organization and what things come our way in terms of, global economy, pandemics, things like that. We are going to break down some key steps that you can take along the way, as well as categorizing and helping you to prioritize what metrics are going to make your ergonomics process successful. We are going to be sharing the recording for this as well as an ebook, which is a nice way to summarize a lot of the content that I'm showing today and just give you a little bit more detail. Like Kay mentioned, if we have questions throughout, feel free to just ask them because I can be stopped at any point just to address those, and I'm sure what you're asking is going to be valuable for everyone. So keep those coming. What I often hear when I'm talking to customers that I've been working with, either brand new or that I've been working with for a really long time, is a lot of focus being on doing assessments. So whenever I ask someone that I'm talking to for the first time, what are you doing in terms of your overall ergonomics process? The first thing is always addressing what kind of assessment or what assessment they're using in order to quantify the risk factors that are present within their organization. And that just always kind of gives me a guide into where their head is at. A lot of times companies think that the assessment piece is really the most important element of an ergonomics process. And if we have a good assessment, or if we get detailed information from our assessment, then we're good to go and we can stop there. And we're going to, we've done all the right things and kind of check the box. But what I want to try and do with this presentation is get our heads away from the assessment as being an important element or being the most important or the only element to focus on. It really is just this small part of this overall big picture. And so it is important that we take a look at metrics that are going to drive us through the job improvement process and not just stop us at the baseline piece. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to be mentioning some key data points that are really, I think, important to the success of any ergonomics process. And so I've lumped them here into 6 key takeaways, which are training, being able to quantify and identify MSD risk factors, identifying and categorizing direct causes, focusing on risk reduction and return on investment, and most importantly, ensuring that your ergonomics process includes employee engagement. And that can be at a lot of different levels, whether it's doing the assessment, like we talked about, having an easy enough assessment that most people can take part, but also just talking to operators who are going to be on the receiving end of any improvements that we come up with and try to implement within the organization. So we're going to get into what I mean in terms of the key data points within each of these elements, but let's just keep these in mind and we'll revisit them at the end as well. What we, and what your goal, what my goal is with any company that I'm working with is really to understand where on a maturity curve like this they sit and where they want to be, and how we're going to get there. And so each of these elements of this ergonomics maturity curve that you see here have some really great pieces that we need to make sure are in good shape before we move to the next level. So it's not just that we, do some proactive assessments and address risk factors prior to someone having injuries at the job, but we have to do everything that's within each of these different categories really, really well in order to be successful. So we have to have a good handle on our MSD management. And then we have to have a good handle on our overall ergonomics process, which is the difference between preventative and proactive or advanced on this maturity curve. Making sure that we're creating a process that's extremely efficient and effective are key things to get us up and to the right, which is where we want to be. So the way that we've outlined this presentation is to, like I said, break it down year by year, but you don't have to follow this this playbook exactly to a T. It doesn't even have to be year. It could be month to month, depending on what your culture's like and how fast you are at deploying your ergonomics process. You might be moving through these years really, really quickly. Other folks might be spending a lot more time than just a year in the preparation phase. That's totally fine. One of the biggest things is not trying to, or just trying to kind of rely, I guess, on what you guys do as an organization and what's going to work well for you. Don't try and make something fit that just isn't going to be effective for you. So understanding and having someone who's your ergonomics champion who really understands the business is going to be, already kind of moving you in the right direction. If you take away the year element of it, then we're just talking about prepping and planning, and then actually getting started with the plan. So that's deployment. And then making sure that this is scalable and that we can expand to either different regions or different departments within a facility, or even on a global scale. And then making sure that along the way, we're creating elements that are going to allow us to sustain the success of this. A lot of times companies focus on rolling out maybe software or doing some in-person trainings and giving people assessment tools, and they think that they're done with the ergonomics process. But it really is something, or we assess every job one time and then we're done with it, or we do an office assessment on every employee and then we're done with it. We need to understand that this should be part of the culture and something that is just going to be moving with your organization forever. So it's not something that comes and goes within 1 or 2 years and you're done with it. It really has to be a focus or a pillar or a metric or a goal within your organization to ensure that you're going to have low MSDs moving forward. And then after you start to mature, you're always kind of going back to the beginning and reevaluating where you are and looking at ways to enhance your process to make sure that you can continue to see, the results that you've achieved to date. You want to make sure that those are going to continue on, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So let's get into some of the detailed elements of what each of these years or these categories might, things that you might want to focus on. So one of the first things, if you don't really have an ergonomics process in place at all and you don't really know where to start, one good tool to use would be some sort of gaps and fits analysis, or comparing yourself to some sort of audit criteria. Where are we currently within these criteria that are important to us, and where do we want to be? so we can understand those gaps and where we want to focus our resources and our attention. And this might just be a simple Gantt chart plan. You might be just a little red, yellow, green metric. It could be a scale, whatever you want to do. You've probably done this for a million different projects within your organizations, but it is important to kind of know where you're starting and where you want to go so that you can identify metrics that are going to get you there and activities that are going to get you there. The second thing, in this day and age, I would say that there's no reason to not have supporting software. There's so many opportunities to do things easily and efficiently. And if there is something out there that's going to make any part of this process easier for you than a manual method, then that needs to be considered. So I would strongly recommend this. Obviously, there's some really great software out there, and it's hard sometimes to pick, but having some criteria. What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? That will kind of guide you to specific vendor questions. And if you can kind of check the box with your vendor to say this does everything that I want it to do, and I'm going to have a good partner in this software supplier, then that is a good first step. That's just going to make the whole process a million times easier, so you don't have to invent the wheel. And obviously you can lean on their expertise to be able to help guide you. So when, even at Velocity, we're always kind of helping with, business reviews and things like that to take a look at our clients and say, here's where you're at. Here's where other similar companies are. Here's where you might want to course correct or adjust. You want to have not just supporting software, but you want to have a partner in your process to ensure that you're going to be successful. The next step would be to identify who in your organization is going to be important to the success of rolling something like this out. So this is just a little summary graphic to show that obviously we want to have, like, if we're going to start from the top level, we need to have somebody who's our go-to person, some sort of ergonomics process lead or manager who's going to know, what our plan is, what our goals are, and what we're trying to achieve. But that individual should also have an executive sponsor on the team who has a specific goal around the success of rolling out the ergonomics process. The process lead or manager isn't going to be necessarily the doer of assessments or the doer of implementing solutions, but they are going to be able to help focus on the strategy that the teams underneath them should follow in order to be successful. So a team, at a single facility, so let's take it down to a small scale. An ergonomics team might be made up of an engineer, someone from quality or productivity, someone from production, someone from medical services or health and safety, might be oftentimes a manager in the area or a group leader or a team leader who can actually get stuff done, maybe someone from maintenance. So you can kind of pick and choose based on who you have at your sites. But I always look for people who not only are creative and can come up with the solutions and have access to computers and things like that, but they're also the people who can get stuff done. They know everybody. They know who is responsible for what. They know how the organization works. Those are the key people that I would want to make sure that I have on the ergonomics team at a site. And then the next level would be managers and supervisors, just to be supportive of the process. So if we go into their area and we want to do assessments, or if we go into their area and we want to implement change, that they understand what that means and the benefit that it's going to have to the organization, and they're kind of on board and supportive of us moving forward. And then obviously the employees, for them to be able to know that they, how to escalate issues, know what the ergonomics team is trying to do, and be receptive to solutions being brought to their area. The next element to consider would be the implementation of training. And I'm not saying we should do, training for everybody across the organization, but you want to kind of pick and choose people's roles based on the responsibilities and roles that we just talked about. But we want to make sure that we are implementing training for the ergonomics team, which might be a little bit more intensive. versus managers and supervisors or employees just having general awareness training. So that's going to be key to just giving them the knowledge and the tools to be able to be effective in terms of what we're asking them to do. And then the last element would be to follow some sort of job improvement process. So this is, I mean, a very simplified version, but you really just want to focus on a baseline analysis. So finding issues, coming up with improvements. You know, a nice step in there is to identify direct causes so you can get to the correct improvement. So, and then moving those improvements through to completion. So that's the fix it stage. And then going back and following up and evaluating that we did the right thing. So that's the check it phase. And then sustain it is just, you know, course correcting as we go, making step changes to risk reduction so that we can go from red to yellow. And then maybe later we keep implementing solutions and we get from yellow to green. But then we keep evaluating and moving through the process. So if we kind of have this as our end goal, and it's, you know, something that we're obviously applying and becomes part of our culture, then that's going to really help to make us successful moving forward. So when it comes to key metrics and targets, when you're just starting to roll out an ergonomics process, I always, in the first year, want to focus on activity metrics. So that might be something like just identifying ergonomics teams. So the percentage of sites that we have that have a team identified and trained. You know, really simple activities that we can check the box on just to get things up and running. People, the percentage of stakeholders that have signed off on the policy. So you got to create the policy, then we got to get people to sign off and support it. You know, that's an easy check the box thing in year one. And then we can start into maybe doing a couple of job assessments. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. A lot of companies come out of the gates when they're rolling out an ergonomics process and just say, let's just spend the entire year one assessing jobs. I always get a little bit panicked with that because I prefer to just take baby steps. I know some people want to try and challenge their teams to do a lot of assessments in year one, but if we just do 1 or 2 assessments per month and couple that with 1 or 2 improvements also implemented per month, then we're going to be much more successful at the end of the year. So I always like to not overwhelm people too much with the data and allow them to focus more on making change. They're going to be much more receptive to that, and it's going to get them really engaged and excited about the process. And so don't just, you know, put on one metric of the number of jobs assessed and that's absolutely it. We should have some other accompanying metrics as well, which we're going to talk about. In the deploy phase, you need to start to establish a rhythm. So having monthly meetings or you know, meetings every a couple of weeks with the actual ergonomics teams, really effective. We want to have that rhythm and we want to stick to it as much as possible. And then making sure that we're reporting on either a monthly or quarterly basis to the executive team so that we don't get to the end of the year and say, we didn't achieve any of our goals because we didn't have this support in Q1. Let's make sure that that's communicated to the executive sponsor and to the ergonomics team manager so that they can get us the resources that we need to be successful. So get that rhythm going and make those monthly meetings or gatherings really effective by having a specific agenda and holding people accountable to what they were required to do, you know, from the last meeting. Making sure that, you know, we've got really active team members is going to ensure that we're going to be successful. The other element that is really, really important is to engage operators. Whenever you have the opportunity to get operators on your ergonomics team, that's fantastic. I love that. A lot of times you're up against the timing of it and you know, having to carve out time for them to actually leave the floor or stay later on a shift. That can be really difficult, but you can look for as many opportunities as possible, even just outside of being on an ergonomics team, to engage the operators. It might be when you go do an assessment with them, just kind of give them some basic training, ask them for improvement ideas, get them involved in communicating the improvements that are coming to the rest of the group. You know, there's a million different ways that we can get operators engaged and involved in the process, and not just having to have them on the ergonomics team. Another key element is to make sure that we're categorizing, prioritizing, and planning for all improvements that we identify while we're going through the assessment piece. So assessments aren't just, go out and evaluate a job and get some sort of score for the different body parts. But part of the assessment is identifying what improvement opportunities there are at a particular workstation or area or cell, and then being able to prioritize those improvements to make decisions for the executive team really easy. So if you go to them and say, here's my red job, and here are the 3 improvements we've come up with, and they're all under $1,000, and they're going to have a high impact on our score and bring us from a red to a green, that's a really easy decision for the team, for anyone to say, I'm fully supportive of this. Making sure that we have that priority and we've thought through the improvements allows you to go to plan, go in front of your executive team and get permission to work on your zone A's, your easy to implement high impact solutions, and then save some of the zone C's, the high impact but maybe more costly or difficult to implement solutions, to next budget planning season. The following year, you can now just do 1 or 2 of those per year, as opposed to derailing your improvement process by focusing on getting a hoist in place or having to spend and budget for $40,000. A lot of us can't do that, but these little simple things, if we constantly have a nice flow of those, let's just work on getting those implemented and doing what we can do to make things better without having to get a ton of buy-in. The next thing to consider is specific metrics at the beginning of each year that are going to work for you. So I'm going to be throwing out a ton of metrics at you guys throughout this presentation, but I would say just pick a couple based on where you're at that are going to be really effective, and set a goal around them, and then just monitor the status to completion. So it might be something simple, like we said before, regarding the number of people trained or the number of jobs assessed, but we should be working towards more I guess, how would I classify it? A little bit more effective metrics as we start to mature through the process. So those types of metrics might be things like the percentage of jobs across the facility that have been analyzed. So we can take a look at the white space that we have across our plant. We've only analyzed 50% of the jobs. So we don't really have a good feel for what percentage of overall our jobs are red, yellow, green. So that might be something to consider. Moving into more of the percentage of jobs that we've analyzed that are considered high risk. That's another thing to consider. Or the number, what I really like are metrics that are going to move me through the job improvement process. So the percentage of high risk jobs that have direct causes identified, or have improvements identified, or have improvements that have been implemented and completed associated with them. Those are metrics that are actually going to get us to what everybody wants at the end of the day, which is MSD reduction, cost reduction, things like that. So making sure that we can, understand overall big picture, what are we looking at in terms of the distribution of jobs assessed versus white space versus percent of those jobs being red, but also moving into more risk reduction targets. So if I could pick a target that I would really want to focus on and just always have every year, it would be the percent risk reduction. You should always have a risk reduction goal in mind at the beginning of every year. So I want to, and it can be really small, it could be 5 to 10% risk reduction, meaning for all of these jobs that I'm assessing, I've got to remove 10% of my risk points by the end of the year. That's really a great goal to keep in mind, because it's going to keep you focused on not just the assessment piece of it, but coming up with solutions and then closing the job improvement process out by reevaluating the job. In the expand year, or when you're ready to expand, you should start to focus more on the elimination of hazards. The risk reduction goal is great, but I would be focusing and prioritizing the improvements on ones that are going to eliminate a lift altogether, or eliminate any, hazard that we find, so we're not exposed to it anymore. So I don't have to do any pushing or pulling. I don't have to do any lifting anymore. If you can eliminate versus, completing, in terms of the hierarchy of controls, completing improvements that are things like training, or administrative controls. We want to try and avoid that and work on the ones that we know are going to be most effective and going to give us the best, their biggest bang for our buck. So if we can focus in on eliminating hazards, that would be great. We should also focus in on not just the overall job score, but focusing in on eliminating hazards for each body part. So if we've got a lot of shoulder injuries, let's figure out where those red shoulders are, what jobs have high burden for the shoulder, and let's focus in there on specific improvements that are going to address that. There's always going to be you're always going to be required, and you should kind of plan for this, that your team will lose members, that you might want to expand your team. Like there might, a lot of times we see that people get so excited about what the ergonomics team is doing that they want to join it. So you can kind of pick and choose what works for you, but I like to have as many people as possible involved. So that might be expanding your team so that there's mini teams all over your facility, or it might be that you have like a rotation where people are able to join the team for a year, and that's just kind of a placement, and then someone else is able to join. There's a lot of different ways to get more and more people across the organization involved. You'll always have folks that leave the organization or leave their roles, and you're going to have to fill those gaps. But a lot of times we find too that a lot of people want to be involved in the ergonomics team. It's a fun team to be on. You can see a lot of success. You can achieve a lot. It's easy. And so, looking for opportunities to expand your team, grow your team, create mini teams, that's always effective too. Another thing to consider is don't just, a lot of times we will just sit in front of our computers in our office and use the data to kind of tell us how we're doing. I think that it's important within every organization to really understand what's going on the floor, gather qualitative feedback from managers in an area, gather qualitative feedback from the employees in an area where you've actually implemented changes, and just get a feel for if they like it. Was this successful? Do you think it would be valuable anywhere else? What kinds of things are you hearing? Do people like what the ergonomics team is doing? And this doesn't have to be formal where I send out like a survey or anything like that. It can just be I'm walking around after I've been a couple of weeks after I've implemented a solution, and I'm just kind of getting a feel for how people like it. What do you guys think? What should we change? How do we make it better? I think that can be really effective and guide you in the right direction. Your ergonomics team should be a team of continuous improvement. They're always wanting to get better as a team, and they're always going to want to make things better for team members. So don't get discouraged if your team implements a solution and then you need to make a change. That happens all the time, 100% of the time, where they need to change a handlebar on a piece of equipment that was put in place, or it needs to have a little bit of padding, or it's not in the right spot. It results in more steps to get there. Little tweaks and changes happen all the time, and that should be expected, and that shouldn't be disheartening at all. You should just kind of move through it and take the advice of the employees, and they know the job's best. So really take that to heart and try and do what they're asking. And then the last part. Go ahead.
Sorry, Christy, this is Kay. We had a question come through, if that's okay.
Sure.
Kim asks, how do we identify risks associated with tasks, and how do we assign or know which task is more hazardous than other tasks? Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So typically you would use some sort of quantitative risk assessment tool. Historically, this has been a manual method where you have different body parts that you're taking a look at, and it'll say the main MSD risk factors: posture, force, duration, frequency, and you'll have to quantify how bad that is for each body part, and then you get an overall score. Most risk assessment tools that are out there, whole body risk assessment tools, are kind of built that way. Nowadays, like at Velocity, we use motion capture, and that's what our customers use. So you take video of a job, and then it gets analyzed for posture, duration, and frequency, leaving you to just enter the forces in manually. So that, I think, is the easiest, best way to ensure that you're doing an accurate risk assessment, and understand really what's going on with that task. And it's just simple and easy for anyone and everyone to go out and take a video. So I think that's the easiest, best method to get really high fidelity information nowadays. But there's tons of one pagers out there, manual methods, spreadsheets, websites, and things like that. And Kim specifically, I'm happy to kind of share what that would look like, and some free ones for you to use if you want. But all of that information just gives you the breakdown across the different body parts, and then a whole body score, a whole job score, you can call it. And they're usually categorized red, yellow, green, and that would help you to prioritize which tasks you want to focus on. And Kim makes a really good point there. What if I start analyzing all these jobs and I don't even know where to start? There's too many red jobs. What do I do? And that's really the beauty of the risk assessment, is to help you to prioritize. You don't have to prioritize. Sometimes the most red job that you have at your plant is the hardest to fix. I've seen that happen before, and it's going to take a little bit of planning, and it's going to take some budget in order to get something effective implemented to bring that score from a high red down into the yellow or green. So that's not necessarily where I would spend my time as an ergonomics team right off the bat, because if I can't do anything right away, I would move on to the next job and try to come up with some quick wins and things that our team can actually implement without having to have a lot of support or budget approved in order to move forward with it. So some metrics and targets to consider when you're expanding your process are, when we're doing analysis, another element of it besides the quantitative risk analysis is doing a discomfort survey for the employees. So using that employee engagement metric, percent change in reports of discomfort, even if you're doing office assessments on folks, once you've done an office assessment, they've implemented some changes, they go back and reevaluate their workstation and reports of discomfort, we want to see those reports of discomfort going down. So that should be a critical metric that is showing that our process is successful. We're seeing people that are not, they didn't ever develop an injury, but they had discomfort, and we were able to kind of nip that before it turned into something. So that is a great metric as well. We want to make sure that when we're talking about risk reduction, that we're just trending on target. I always want to watch our risk reduction targets throughout the year and not just wait till the end of the year and compile some sort of spreadsheet. I want to know every single month, are we on track? Do we need to make adjustments? How are we going to get to our goals at the end of the year? The other thing to think about as you start to mature and you're doing more and more activities as a team, the number of red jobs that you were able to move out of the red category into the green or yellow. That's we were able to get 50 jobs this year out of the red. That's an amazing metric and thing in element that you want to be able to report out to the executive team, because if I'm on the leadership team, I am blown away by that metric. If we're able to get our red jobs down, great. That should be the number one thing that we're focused on. The other thing, as you start to mature your ergonomics process, you can start to look at the amount of money that we spent implementing solutions, because that would give us an idea of how much we need to budget for every year, and the return on investment. So how much have we invested in this process, implementing changes, or training the team, or buying software, or whatever it is, versus what kind of injury reduction and improvement are we seeing, which is obviously a great metric and what your leadership team is going to be looking for. So here's an example of something like that, where you're able to say, okay, here are the activities that we're doing. We're doing assessments. We are taking a look at incident rate and things like that. But we want to make sure that we're able to measure our direct cost savings. We're going to be able to measure our quality or productivity savings and trying to understand what an overall ROI is going to be. That's hard to do in year one, but as you mature, it will be something that you're going to be able to pull easy metrics and really understand what the ROI is. And leadership loves that. And then they start to back you more in terms of implementing solutions and giving you more budget for that kind of thing. In the sustain phase, so as you're starting to grow, now what we want to make sure is that like we feel like the ergonomics process is just integrated into what we do. It's part of PDCA. Everybody knows what it is. There's awareness across the facility. It's part of our pillars or our KPIs or metrics for the year. That we have design standards in place, that our engineers know about it. This should just be, if I walk into your plant, a good measure of this is just if I walk into your plant and I ask anybody on the floor what ergonomics is and what the ergonomics policy or procedure is within your organization, they're going to know. And I see that, when I get to this stage, when I'm going to the sites and I'm doing an audit or I'm checking in on how our customers are doing, this is what makes me happy. When first thing I'll do is just go talk to an operator and say, so, have you had any changes made at your workstation? Has the ergonomics team been out here? Do you know what the who is on the ergonomics team or what they do? That kind of thing is a good measure of, yeah, stuff is happening, versus, we're just making 1 or 2 fixes per year, for example. The next thing. Yep, go ahead.
We've got one more question from
Sure.
Michelle, who asks, how do you audit the ergonomics process if not the current if the current program isn't this intricate?
Well, the audit can be completely developed. If there's nothing that, if I'm reading the question right, if there's nothing that's in place currently, you're basically auditing to where you want it to be or where a world-class process would be. And that's something that I can send over to Michelle, some criteria to consider. We have like a nice little checklist just to kind of understand where you're at currently, and that's just what based on what we know works. So if you don't really have anything in place, then you're kind of comparing or auditing to where you want to be or where you should be. And then as you start to develop things, then you're auditing again to where you want to be in the future and where you should be, but also compared to what you actually did. Did we achieve the things that we set out to do? Are we at least, starting down the path of doing the right things? And you can think back to that, to the chart that I showed at the beginning, where you're just kind of starting to reevaluate yourself every year and you start to fill in these gaps, and your understanding of the overall process is going to get a lot better. And we're just kind of monitoring, every year how we're progressing. So I would say, you want to just try and get to, you don't have to be like, what I'm hesitant to say is compare yourself to a world-class organization and you're going to feel really bad if you score, like a 5 out of 100 or something like that. But you really just want to take the elements that are going to work for you and what is going to benefit your organization and just compare to that. The other thing to consider in the sustain phase is to expand your training. If there's been turnover or if you want to get more people involved, just understand, if you did an evaluation like this to understand what individuals have been trained, and we found that mostly it's just safety staff and no one else, well, then I would want to try and adjust this and get a little bit more visibility across the entire organization in all kinds of different roles, as opposed to just, our leadership or just our safety staff. I want to make sure that everyone has at least the, a basic level of understanding of ergonomics. This is to Michelle's point related to the audit. So this is an example, and I can, send over specific criteria or things to consider, and you can just pick and choose a few if you want. But this is really just, are we meeting our criteria? Are we getting there? Are we in progress? Are we, are we not meeting? Are we nowhere close? And we'll usually just look for some sort of evidence that can support that. And this just gives you a nice little, distribution of where we need to focus in the future years. Year 4 metrics and targets should be focused in around, like I said, training, but keep that rhythm of the number of the percentage of red jobs, or as you start to mature, even focusing on red body areas. So sometimes by year 2 or 3, I've seen companies have no red jobs. So they really kind of did an amazing job, but when we look at more detail associated with the risk assessment, there are still body parts that are red. So then they'll start to adjust their targets to be 0 or a lower percentage of red body areas, so that we're seeing all green and yellow on our risk assessments, which is even better, because now all of our body parts, we're feeling pretty comfortable that we're in a good spot and we're not going to result in injuries. The other thing to consider is the number of red jobs introduced. So I think that this is important, because if you start to get up that maturity curve that we talked about at the beginning into more proactive and advanced, that means that you are focusing on introduction of new products and equipment and ensuring that you have gate reviews and designs. You're designing in ergonomics, so you're not introducing any red jobs to your facilities, which is key. Obviously, we don't want to be kind of spinning our wheels and constantly fixing things that are coming our way. If we can address that early, then that is going to be really, really important. So training your engineers and folks who are involved in that process, pilot teams, new product introduction, design, all of those individuals should understand what ergonomics is, how to use the ergonomic design guidelines, what the assessments are going to look like when they come out, and proactively try to address that. In the last phase here that we'll talk about is enhancement. This is where I would say, always kind of challenge yourself. Whether that's I can't even count how many of my customers email every year and say, I'm going to go for my CPE. That always makes me really excited, because that means that they're they might have been from industrial hygiene or from safety, and now they have liked the ergonomics process. They've gained a lot of experience and they want to get certified in it. That's kind of, always continuing to educate yourself, going to webinars, going to conferences, getting certified, which is a challenge. It's hard for us older folks like me to learn something new. But it is, really gonna make your process better, and think about what you can bring to your team, but also to you as an individual, in terms of your growth and your experience and your opportunities moving forward. So I'd say always challenge yourself to get better, and take those opportunities to network within the ergonomics world is very small. So going to conferences, AEC, AHA conferences, meeting folks who are doing this and kind of networking across similar industries. We have networking events within our organization for our customers, just so they can talk to each other. That I always find is to be extremely valuable. And those are just, not just learning from each other, but those end up being lifelong friendships and experiences as well that are, that stay with people. So I always like those.
Christy, I've got a couple of questions that I think relate to the last couple of slides. Sorry to interrupt again.
No problem.
Someone says, if you could share the audit checklist, that would be great. And then their question was, what measures do you recommend to avoid burnout or overwhelming the ergonomics teams if they have other primary jobs across the organization that may be very demanding, such as in nursing? And I have a second question, but
that's a really great question. Yeah, that's a really great question. I love that one. So I 100% agree. I feel like sometimes there's burnout with the beginning of implementing an ergonomics process, because people challenge the ergonomics team. Like maybe they just invested in software and they want to be able to see a quick return. And so they challenge the team with assessing every jobs in year 1. That's like the worst goal for me, because at the end of the year, all you have is a bunch of assessments and a burned out team. We've got other jobs, we've got other things going on. We can't just be doing assessments all the time, especially if you have a lot of jobs in your facility. So that's one thing that I feel like companies do wrong. Just focus on assessments and that's it. Because at the end of the year, you have nothing but assessments. We haven't gotten anywhere. We haven't achieved anything. What I would prefer is based on how much time you have, if you can carve out an hour a month, you could get one assessment done and you can come up with 2 or 3 improvements for that job. And you can work on the following month implementing 1 or 2 of those improvements and then doing another assessment. Doing one assessment and one improvement per month, in my opinion, is going to be better than by the end of the year than having done 24 assessments in the year. I'd rather see 12, but 12 improvements implemented as well. So that's the way that I like baby stepping our way through this. Once you get into that rhythm, if you don't burn folks out, they're going to get excited about it. They're going to know how the process works. So really simple targets to hit is the way that I would set it up for a team. I see this other question too.
Yeah,
Okay, that's sort of like specific to the type of assessment that you're doing. So I've shown a few different types of assessments in here, and they're all usually categorized. It just depends on what kind of data you're collecting, and how many categories you have for posture, for force, that are going to give you an understanding of what those ranges look like. But specific to the assessment that we're looking at today, I can provide that to Kim off this call.
Great, thanks.
So the other metrics, the last section related to metrics and targets that you might want to consider are obviously ROI. That, like, as you start to mature and have more and more data, you're really going to start to want to hone in on showing the success of your team. So 3 and 5 year ROI is really good. The dollar amount savings in terms of productivity, quality, and safety savings. A lot of times people overlook productivity and quality impact, but you can get some really good hard numbers there. So I like to focus there as much as possible. Taking a look at the number of red body areas eliminated, or at a minimum decrease, but I'd like to see them, all the reds eliminated if at all possible, and % risk reduction to goal. And just always fixing that risk reduction or updating that risk reduction target. To Daniela's question earlier, I think one of the key things is setting a really small risk reduction target to start, like 5%, 10%. Sometimes people come in, hot, and they say 50% risk reduction this year to get to our goal, or we want to get 75% risk reduction or no red jobs, and really try to hit these really lofty goals. And that can be disheartening for the team. We see some of our best customers get 15 to 20%. So let's just start small and kind of grow ourselves and challenge ourselves after we get familiar with the process. So those we're coming up to the last 10 minutes just for questions. And like I said, we'll send out this ebook, which is just a nice reference, because I hate going through these things where I get a lot of numbers thrown at me and metrics and things like that. So we've summed them up nicely in this ebook, and that way you can reference it at any point if you have any questions along the way. And we have a few questions here. Okay, I'm not sure if you want me to read through some of these questions. I'm happy to do that.
Sure. I think I can see some on my end. I'm wondering if I just have one new one that I see on my end. I wonder, are some people maybe privately chatting you that I can't see?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I have one here I'll read through. I think that's a good question. Do you have any recommendations of Ergo eval software? Sometimes when the sites don't use software and follow templates, for example, EJMS tools, it still seems a bit biased, even with some guidelines, and that might affect the scores, especially if different people are reviewing the forms in 5 years. How do we avoid that? Okay, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, I don't want this to be a sales pitch, but obviously I recommend our software. We have, it's motion capture. So it eliminates that exact thing that Sabrina's describing. That to be totally honest, if I were to do an assessment and I had an ergonomist colleague do an assessment, we would probably have a different score. And if I was to do an assessment, even worse, 5 years ago, and then I would do the same assessment, today, I would probably also see a different score, which is unfortunate, but we've tested this a number of times and it just happens to be true. When you take the guesswork out of it and you have, say, motion capture or these tools that are much less subjective, I think that's where it's at. That's going to kind of skip through the difficulty of doing those assessments and the training required and the subjectivity, obviously, and the inter-rater reliability issues that we see with that.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think I do see another couple.
Okay,
I just
perfect.
see that one. I think that one is, yeah. The next question I have is, would you measure the 3 to 5 year ROI in terms of workers' comp costs, OSHA rates, or lost days?
Yeah, that's it's kind of whatever key great information that you have. So for example, on this slide here, the direct cost savings are workers' comp costs. So that's just watching our workers' comp costs go down. That's usually a delayed, like you'll see that 1 to 2 years after you start to actually make headway in terms of risk reduction. Productivity savings, I find, is a great ROI because it's immediate and you can look at it, right away. Like we were able to, produce X more, or we were able to be more efficient here, or this was a job that was ended up being a little bit of a bottleneck before, and we were able to address that. That kind of stuff, direct savings, and also really effective and easy to grab the information. You could also measure like incident rate reduction. That's another one. So I would say, percent, or you could show it going down, or TIR going down. That is another good metric. So it's really just like what do you have really good insight and data on? And then I would measure it that way.
Thank you, Christy. Roland says, nice overview, and asks, how do you implement it in the design phase, in the conceptual phase, and testing phase? There's also a lot of qualitative data beside the design guidelines. How do you implement qualitative data?
That's a really good point. So we do a lot of work with what we would call like pilot teams or new product introduction teams. And design guidelines are one big thing, so having like a gate review or a checkpoint to say, have we made sure that the reach distances are all within X, and we made sure that the heights are all within X, and nobody's reaching overhead, and no one's applying force over, 15 pounds or whatever it is. We have specific guidelines, and a lot of companies adjust those based on what level of risk they're comfortable with. So you can either, we have design guidelines that are based on just the anthropometrics of people, and then a lot of companies have made adjustments to that kind of baseline guideline. So that's one spot to do it. But a lot of times you don't even have hard parts. This is just an idea, a plan. Maybe you've got it on paper, if you've got it in, in a CAD model or something like that. So you kind of can build in the design guidelines pretty easily, but then there might just be things that are missed. A lot of companies now will have some sort of mock-up station where they'll, build it out a little bit. And with motion capture, all you need to do is capture the movements of the person to understand what they're doing. Some companies are a little bit advanced in terms of tech, and they have VR. And even if you're in VR, like besides, there's obviously issues with VR where you're not really, you don't butt up against, a piece of equipment or something like that, so you can kind of walk through it. But if you can get a feel for the movements and positions and what the employees are going to be doing, you can actually do motion capture off of that too. So there's a few different ways to do it. And then the other thing is just understanding what jobs exist currently that might be similar to the one that you're planning, and getting feedback from folks going to other sites, like just a kind of go and see activity where you can either use motion capture, talk to people who are doing it currently, and try to course correct for whatever's being introduced. I hope I got that I hope I interpreted that question properly.
Okay, thanks. Amanda says, great presentation. If you have a majority of office workers, would you recommend conducting multiple risk assessments on different office layouts, and what approach would you take?
Okay, so for the office, I would approach things a little bit differently than the non-office environment. So in the office environment, I don't see, because of the software that's out there and the ability to assess every individual multiple times very easily in a short period of time, because you can train them, you can have them do their own assessments. It's all online. It'll quantify your scores for you. So I can do it at my home office. I can do it at my if I go into a traditional office, I can do it from like a hotel, or if I'm part of a fleet or a sales group, I can do it from the vehicle. I could really do an evaluation of any environment that I'm working in using software quickly and effectively. So if, in the office, I would say you're analyzing every person. In the non-office environment, you're analyzing every job. It doesn't matter the person that's doing it. But the office is so specific to the individual in terms of how they set it up, what their equipment's like, how they sit, the position. Doing an evaluation of every person is a lot more effective. Now, if you are looking at different office layouts and coming up with a design change, then you would definitely want to have like a checklist where you're evaluating each of those office layouts to say which one is the best one to actually implement.
Thanks, Christy. The next question comes from Michelle, who asks, do you have any recommendations on staff that are obese, how to help them feel supported on items that don't fit them?
That's a really good question too, and I do run into that a lot, specifically in the office environment. I think you might be talking about that. We find that I used to do a lot of talks about this, but it was about 8 years ago or so. So I don't know if my stats are also correct at this point, but a lot of times, like, so if you think about the obese population and just the office environment, when they're sitting in a chair, for example, they might not have the lumbar support in the right spot because of the way that the chair is designed, or they might be sitting up a little bit higher in the chair, leading them to have more of an awkward wrist posture in a stationary workstation that's not height adjustable. So it is definitely something that needs to be addressed with them on an individual basis, especially the office. So there are a ton of chairs that have different sizes out there, where you can do it. Same thing goes for obese population, but also the very small population, so 5th percentile female and below. They feel the same way in a chair where, it's just not fitting them properly, or they can't make the same adjustments, or their feet are still dangling, even if they're at the lowest point in their chair height adjustability. So both populations, you want to make sure that you can accommodate. So even in office software, you can build in that we have a small, medium, and large option for a chair. And we have, we want to make sure that our knee wealth space is going to be enough for every individual. So that is all, those are little things that you can do that I think can be really effective. And then everything is just, in terms of talking one-on-one, it's just kind of, having experience with that and knowing the right things to say based on the individual. I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk fast. We're coming up to the end of our time here.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Christy. Yeah, like you mentioned, unfortunately, we're out of time for today, so I wanted to wrap up and thank Christy lots for her presentation, Velocity EHS for sponsoring today's webinar, and all of our participants. I believe we got to everyone's questions, but if we didn't, we'll be providing those to Velocity EHS, so Christy will be able to get in touch. And we'll soon open registration for 2 Synergist webinar events happening next month, so please keep an eye on aiha.webvent.tv for updates. Thanks to everyone again, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, this was great. This actually concludes today's webcast. Thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at aiha.webvent.tv. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with that link. And please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts.